Imagine stepping into a courtroom where logic bends, the truth hides behind laughter, and justice wears a crooked smile. In today's case, we're not just observing a trial, we're peeling back the curtain on a story so bizarre it could only happen in real life. As always, all characters are presumed innocent until proven guilty, but in this courtroom, the verdict might surprise you. So sit back, lean in, and remember, in CourtSpiral, reality is stranger than fiction. Let's dive into the case. Our story begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where the mundane rhythm of daily life was disrupted by an extraordinary event. A local man named Richard, known for his unremarkable job and friendly demeanor, found himself embroiled in a legal battle that would make headlines across the nation. Richard had just returned home from a late shift when he discovered something unsettling. His house had been broken into. The scene was chaotic, drawers were pulled out, personal items were strewn across the floor, and the feeling of violation hung heavy in the air. But what followed this unsettling discovery was something no one could have predicted. Instead of simply calling the police and filing a report, Richard took an unusual step that would land him in the annals of legal history. He decided to sue the very man who had robbed him. Yes, you heard that right. Richard, the victim of a burglary, was now the plaintiff in a case against the burglar, who had been identified as a man named Tony. Tony, a habitual offender with a lengthy rap sheet, had been caught red-handed, but instead of facing the consequences, he decided to turn the tables. The details of this case would unravel a series of events that would leave many questioning not just the legal system, but morality itself. The reason behind Richard's audacious lawsuit, it stemmed from an unusual incident during the burglary. When Tony broke into Richard's home, he tripped over a loose carpet and fell, injuring himself in the process. In a strange twist of fate, this injury led Tony to believe he had grounds for a legal claim against Richard. After all, he argued, if the premises had not been in disarray, he wouldn't have fallen. In his mind, he was the victim of an unsafe environment, and Richard was the negligent homeowner. As word spread about this bizarre lawsuit, it drew attention not just locally but also nationally. Legal experts and ordinary citizens alike were baffled. How could a burglar sue his victim? This question ignited debates about the very foundation of our legal system. Was it possible for a criminal to seek damages for injuries sustained while committing a crime? The case quickly became a hot topic, with opinions divided. Some argued that this was a clear abuse of the legal system. They pointed out that allowing criminals to sue their victims sets a dangerous precedent. If Tony were to win, what would stop others from doing the same? On the other hand, there were those who argued that the law should protect all individuals regardless of their actions. If Tony was indeed injured due to Richard's negligence, then perhaps he had a right to seek compensation. As the case moved forward, Richard found himself facing mounting pressure. Not only was he dealing with the emotional aftermath of the burglary, but now he had to defend himself in court against a man who had taken advantage of his misfortune. The media frenzy surrounding the case added to his distress. Headlines screamed about the absurdity of the situation, and Richard became a reluctant celebrity overnight. In court, the proceedings were nothing short of theatrical. Richard's attorney argued passionately that Tony was fully responsible for his injuries. After all, he had committed a crime by breaking and entering. The defense attorney for Tony, however, painted a different picture. He claimed that Richard had created a hazardous environment, arguing that the loose carpet was a clear indication of negligence. The courtroom was filled with tension as both sides presented their arguments. Witnesses were called to testify. Friends and neighbors of Richard spoke about his character, describing him as a diligent homeowner who took pride in his property. They recounted how he was always quick to help others, and how he often went out of his way to ensure his home was safe and welcoming. These testimonials painted a picture of a victim trying to reclaim his life after the trauma of a crime. On the other side, Tony's friends took the stand. They described him as a man who had fallen on hard times, struggling with addiction and poverty. They argued that his circumstances had driven him to commit the crime, and they expressed sympathy for his situation. This testimony added a complex layer to the case, forcing the jury to consider not just the legal aspects but also the human elements involved. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the jury was grappling with their own beliefs about justice and responsibility. They listened intently as both sides made their cases, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Richard sat quietly, his heart heavy with uncertainty. Would the jury see him as the victim he was, or would they sympathize with the burglar who claimed he had been wronged? The turning point came when expert witnesses were brought in to discuss the nuances of premises liability law. Legal experts explained that property owners could indeed be held responsible for injuries that occurred on their property, even if the person injured was committing a crime. This information sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Was it possible that Richard could be found liable for the actions of a burglar? As the days of the trial wore on, the jurors began to deliberate. They were faced with a unique challenge: how to reconcile the moral implications of the case with the legal definitions of liability. They had to consider whether Richard's home was truly unsafe and whether Tony had acted recklessly in the first place. The deliberations were long and intense, filled with discussions about justice, responsibility, and the complexities of human behavior. Finally, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The jury delivered their verdict and the courtroom fell silent. Richard held his breath, heart racing, as the foreman stood to read the decision. The words that followed would determine the fate of both men and set a precedent for future cases involving similar circumstances. When the verdict was announced, it sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Richard was found not liable for Tony's injuries. The jury ruled that a burglar could not claim damages for injuries sustained while committing a crime. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Some cheered, feeling a sense of justice had been served, while others questioned the implications of such a ruling. Tony, however, did not take the verdict lying down. In a surprising move, he attempted to appeal the decision, insisting that he had been unfairly treated. His appeal was based on the argument that the jury had not fully understood the complexities of the situation. This further fueled the media frenzy, reigniting debates about the legal system and the rights of victims versus perpetrators. The case continued to attract attention long after the verdict. Legal scholars began to analyze its implications, discussing how it might affect future burglary cases and the responsibilities of homeowners. It became a widely cited example in law schools, sparking discussions about the boundaries of civil liability and the moral dilemmas faced by the legal system. In the aftermath of the trial, Richard tried to return to his normal life, grappling with the emotional scars left by the burglary and the subsequent legal battle. He became a reluctant advocate for victims' rights, sharing his story in interviews and public speaking engagements. He emphasized the importance of standing up for oneself and the need for a legal system that protects the innocent. Meanwhile, Tony's life took a different turn. Following his loss in court, he faced renewed scrutiny and was eventually incarcerated for unrelated charges. His story served as a cautionary tale about the consequences of choices made in desperation and the complexities of navigating a system that sometimes seems to prioritize the rights of criminals over those of victims. In the end, the case of the burglar suing his victim became much more than a legal dispute. It morphed into a cultural phenomenon, raising questions about justice, morality, and the human condition. It reminded us that sometimes reality can be stranger than fiction, and that the courtroom is a stage where the most unexpected dramas unfold. As we reflect on this intriguing case, we are left with a profound understanding of the complexities of human behavior and the intricacies of the legal system. It serves as a reminder that in the pursuit of justice, the lines between right and wrong can often blur, and the outcomes can be as unpredictable as the characters involved. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the courtroom, where the extraordinary became reality and the absurd turned into a landmark case. In the realm of law, every story is unique, and every verdict carries with it the weight of human experience. Remember, in CourtSpiral, the truth may just be stranger than fiction.